Are we aborting poll?
Well, alright. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening to those across the pond, and good morning to those on the other side of the planet. My name is Adam K, aka Bay, and welcome to another episode of Final Boss. As I turn down the mixer real quick here. Perfect. But if you weren't ready for that, ready to check, then we're gonna pull without you, and no loot, I'm sorry. Typical.
Wipe it.
Just wipe
my
it.
Pre-pot.
But this is Final Boss for August the 11th, 2013. This is episode 2, and we have some priests on tonight to talk about bubbles and prayer of mending and cooldowns and things, and a little bit of legendary talk. I know we've had feedback that like, don't talk about legendaries, but we have to knock out all 4, and then we'll be good to go. So you guys just sit tight, and we will work on that. Well, joining us again, as always, Jenny. Just
Hello.
moved to her new place. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be in a different location. My room's a little bit larger. You'll probably see me more streaming independently. And I don't know, it's pretty exciting. So let me know what you guys think about the new room and just give me feedback.
Yeah. Great stuff. Also tonight, one of our guests. Oh, I gotta change this. Hang on, I'll see if I can do it. Can I do it? Perfect. Derevka, good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. It's only 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Well, hey. Hey, alright. It's technically evening at what? Is it 4:30, 5 o'clock?
6.
Getting close. 6?
6.
I'm just, I'm
amateur hour?
I'm catering to the European crowd right now that are joining us from across the pond. But thank you for joining us tonight. And also, again, we also have Sacer. Hello, Sacer. How are you doing?
I am good. How are you guys?
And you just... Where's the button here? There we go. Perfect. Alrighty, alright. So, I think the music is still going, which is good. I fixed it.
Oh, good.
So good evening, everybody. We have a whole lot
Alright.
of priestly ways to discuss this evening. Let me move this out of the way here. Perfect. So Derevka is from the home of where DBM comes from. Those of you that didn't know that, we were talking about that the other day, and he said, "Might as well mention it. I think that's a really cool thing to add." So
Why not?
Why not? Definitely, why not?
Yeah.
But I think the first thing on the topic tonight, to get right into it, because we have been running long lately, I don't want to dally things too much, and we have to make sure we leave enough time to not talk about legendaries for too long, is what have you guys been up to lately? PTR stuff? What's going on with you guys?
Let's start with Derevka.
Oh, Derevka?
Sure. Well, in-game has been a lot of just cleaning up, doing clears, trying to get as much gear on everybody, saturating, the whole best in slot mentality for a while. A couple weeks ago, we started doing more of the meta achievements, and working on that. We're going to be doing some PTR polls with Flex. As you alluded to earlier, one of our main tanks is the primary coder for DBM, so we do spend a lot of time trying to make sure that he can get in and get the logs he needs to get the coding done. So that's something that we do spend a good deal of time on, not just on regular Flex testing, but also on the 10 and 25 stuff, because he pretty much does tons of heavy lifting for us, and it's really helpful for not just the community, but for us as a guild to make sure that the mod we're using is what we want it to be.
Yeah, it must be a lot of work to get all that set up, because I don't even know how that entails. There's so much work behind the scenes to make that, and all of us that download it are just like, oh yeah, there it is, and there's a new update.
Press
Oh,
the button.
perfect. Yeah, we don't know what goes into that behind the scenes. Yeah.
So there's a good deal of that, but a lot of it, in-game has been mostly, 10-man alt runs and doing, 13 clears just to try to get as much gear as you want, and kind of getting, kicked in the crotch when you coin a heroic Thunderforge cloak, and you're just like, really? Again? Come on. Not at all what I wanted off.
Don't need that anymore. Yep.
Ah.
And
Have
so
you
what
been doing any PTR recently? What do you think?
Not in the past couple of days, but tonight we're going to be doing flex runs, just try to get some more people exposed to the new boss mechanics. Kind of getting ready to do more of a sprint once this drops, probably in about another month. Is probably everyone's guess, that mid-September date, so we can do that. But testing the set bonuses. A lot of the pre stuff had some bug issues. I know Holy's 4-piece just got finally fixed, so now we actually get to test that. And by test it, I mean sit in the corner and cry because it's Sanctuary related, but
yeah,
we make deal with it.
We're going to get to that later. Definitely, we have a little bit to talk about that.
A little bit more nitty gritty.
Yeah, yep. And Sacer, what about you?
Well, we finished the tier in July, and we've been doing like 1 to 2 night farm clears since then. I've been traveling a bit and working a lot, so that's been nice for my schedule. I leveled a Protection Warrior alt. Been having a lot of fun with that. Did a little bit of PTR testing. No bosses, but just kind of checking out the discipline changes.
How many of those we got going on right now tonight too? Like how big of a change are we going to talk about this evening once we get into that? I know you guys don't see it in the chat room right now, but I know I noted last week that we had a huge. We make show notes for the show and organize all this stuff out before, and I thought Skull and Sloot had a whole lot of posting. No, you don't even know. When you get like a Forum MVP and a moderator from How to Priest and you're talking about priests, my show notes don't even look like show notes anymore. It's like a Bible. It's just unbelievable. There's a lot of.
Publish it to an academic journal. I swear.
I know,
terrible.
and it's incredible though because there's so much information to talk about, and I hope we can really get to all this stuff. So please don't let me stop you when you go off on a tangent to get all this stuff out to the mobs and the minions, because that's why we're here. Oh my goodness, where do we even begin here? Jenni, what do you want to do?
Oh man. Well, let's see here. Let's talk about the PTR talents and the changes made to priest talents. What do you think, Derevka?
I mean, there's a number of the different tiers that have changed. I mean, we can go through them each kind of one by each if we want to, but the big ones really from a talent. The first one would be the level 31, which is our movement tier, and the biggest one there was they really tried to force us to use feathers, right? So they buff feathers to last notably longer than body and soul, and to be an 80% sprint, which is nice and all. My big challenge with feathers is that the targeting ability is non-existent. You can't single target a certain person, and I get that that needs to be a bit of a challenge, right? But the bigger problem with it is the fact that it has a very, lack of a better word, kludgy, distance that you need.
Is
to
that
be
a technical term?
It is a very technical term.
What does that even mean?
Tooltip. So long as the target is kludgy yards from the feather, they will receive the 80% sprint. No, but the issue is that you can't select it. The number of times I've tried to sprint myself and then had like the druid running alongside me pick it up, even though on my screen they look like they're 15 yards ahead of me already, is kind of the bigger problem. I think the only time you'll really use feathers over body and soul is if you already have another disc priest in raid and you don't want to be having weakened soul problems, or what's probably more likely is on fights that you can precast them and have them in a specific area to prevent or allow you to use them. I think in current content, the only example that would work on that would probably be something like Jikun, where you can put the feathers behind you, and then when you get the pushback, you can pick up the feather and start to move forward, or really
that's right.
move forward, but just not fall back any further. I don't know if you have anything to add.
Have you
on
ever
that.
tried using them on Lei Shen?
Not as often, mostly.
Like we usually use warlock portals, but there's been situations where we only have 2 warlocks, so we never
helms?
actually tried it for helm. Yeah.
We have warlock portals in 3 of our 4 quadrants. In our 4th quadrant, we have stacked with people who are able to typically survive it. But on fights, for myself, I usually position myself closer to the center, right as helm is due to go out. So if I am selected, a single body and soul is enough to prevent me from falling. So that's what I do, at least.
Yeah. I think it's pretty standard for most groups to run forward after the helm. or before the helm comes out, just you know, to prep. And especially if you have a warlock portal, some people might, you know, take a while to catch on, and it pushes them back a little bit. I know that people have gotten pushed off the edge because they weren't prepared for it to come out.
Yeah. I think there's a couple people in chat talking about that PvP, it has a stronger application, and I definitely do agree, particularly in Arena where you may only have 3 people that have the ability to access it, because obviously your foes aren't able to hit them, so you have a smaller subset of people and you can kind of spread them out a bit more.
Yeah. Because I never see feathers ever. I have them on my priest because they're fun to run back and forth between the bank and the auction house, but then, like you said earlier too, about the whole, like, I don't know what word you used again, is that I can drop them in front of me, and then some other person will get the buff before I walk through it, even though not even in the animation. So, yeah, that's all I use them for. But I haven't really ever seen them in raids, so maybe we'll see them in 5.4 then. And what else do we have up here? Oh my goodness, what is this? So we have the movement feather buffs, and what about level 45? We put on here. What's your 45 tier like for talents?
We've got From Darkness Comes Light, Mindbender, and Solace and Insanity.
So what changed about those?
Well, I know for Discipline, the go-to is Solace and Insanity. So they buffed the mana back from Mindbender, and they changed From Darkness Comes Light to be affected by more spells, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Mindbender has a slightly higher restore than it did before, also does more damage. And From Darkness is basically now, it's not exactly every spell, but basically any healing spell that has a mana cost pretty much will have a chance to trigger From Darkness, which gives you a free flash heal. And we can talk about it a little bit later when we get into gear.
Sure.
But the synergy that exists between, for Holy at least, between From Darkness, given the fact that it's flash heal linked and Serendipity in the 2-piece, has a lot going for it. And I'm pretty much a firm believer that it's really going to be the de facto choice from that tier for Holy once you get your 2-piece bonus. Just because 100% bonus to your Prayer of Healing through Serendipity, linked with From Darkness, and then you can, if you want to, you can get even more complicated by leveraging your meta bonus, allowing you to do free healing in that window to then give you another free flash heal to then give you a boosted Serendipity. It's potentially quite interesting, to put not too fine a point on it.
Yeah, like as I am not a priest myself, it definitely sounds like there are lots of rotational elements. Are these like really proc oriented, like, oh, I got this, then I can do this, or are they controllable? Like, how controllable does this sound to me? Like, to me, I'm just like, oh, I just click this when this happens, but is it controllable or very proc oriented? Like,
well, From Darkness is a flat 15% chance, so you have a chance to do it. Now, Binding Heal is a little bit funky given the fact that it actually has equal chances to occur on either target, yourself, and the target you're hitting Binding Heal with. So you do have a little bit better of an opportunity to get that there. But it's one of those ones where you need to really kind of view mana as a zero-sum game. So you have a finite amount of mana for the duration of the fight, right? And regen, and that's where people kind of struggle, saying, oh, well, Mindbender is the only one that truly restores mana. Well, okay, From Darkness Comes Light, and by proxy, the 2-piece benefit is only really beneficial in the event that the spell you're casting is truly something you would have cast already. You're not just going to throw out a 100% bonused Prayer of Healing when it's not necessary, thereby wasting the buff, but also thereby wasting the mana cost reduction as well as the free flash heal. So you have to really kind of leverage it in that space. Like, if there's not a lot of spot healing, then you're not really going to want From Darkness. If it's going to be periods of just nothing, and then boom, you need to heal nonstop like in a raw den for that last like minute and a half, then yeah, maybe something like Mindbender or more traditional, maybe a Solace Weaving in there. It's just a little bit tricky. You have to kind of really make your decisions based on, is the fight damage pattern going to line up with From Darkness? And most of the fights that we've been testing so far really lend themselves well to From Darkness.
Yeah. That's really interesting, because I have no idea what the healers do behind the scenes, but it seems like we're going to be talking about a whole lot of stuff that it's going to educate me and hopefully lots of people. Because
It's okay. I don't have any healers either. So it's, I'm definitely, trying to keep up, but it sounds like there's a lot of underlying complexity to the whole role. So,
Mm-hmm.
let's see here. So from what I understand, there's going to be let's see here. There's going to be new fun cosmetic glyphs for the P tier. What do you guys think about the new glyphs?
Sacer, what do you think?
Well, I was just testing those on PTR the other day, so let's see here. The main ones are feathers, inspired hymns, and shifted appearances, and the Shaw. So the Shaw most priests are already familiar with. We received that bonus from our Shaw touched weapons. Feathers will give you like the Archangel feathers every time you finish casting a spell. It doesn't work with Atonement, but it's up all the time. And Derevka was saying something about the sound being annoying on that one.
I think we were, yeah. He definitely said something about the sound being annoying.
So when you activate Archangel, it kind of has that like wah noise when it activates. But the feathers, basically, they coded it so it's identical. So if you have a lot of heals going out again and again and again, you kind of hear that constant active wah noise. So it's just really irritating, assuming you play with in-game sounds. If you don't, then you're not going to notice it. I do because I kind of like it from an immersion perspective. But rumors are kind of bouncing around. I haven't tested it this week, excuse me, because I took the glyph off, that they're supposed to be removing the sound effect and just having the visual, which would probably be rather welcome, I'm sure.
So there was definitely a big cry out that was a really annoying noise because you're actually taking
Well, it
it
annoyed
out.
me, and I'm kind of a large cry ass. So.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it annoyed you, it gets taken out of the game. Perfect. Worth. That's all right. That's good. That's it, I guess. And now the last thing you had here too was outside of the cosmetic changes, what's going on with the actual, let's talk about the 2 pieces and the 4-piece bonuses for you guys getting into tier 16.
Oh my.
Oh, that's an interesting topic.
Sacer goes first because I know I know
Start
this.
with 2P.
I'll start with the general
Yeah.
stuff here.
Okay.
So let's see. Let me find my notes here. So 2Ps, well, for they're different because Discipline and Holy have 2 very different bonuses. For Discipline, you're just going to get a flat 10% crit whenever your Archangel is up. So that's huge. That's great. For the 4-piece, you're going to get Haste and Mastery when Spirit Shell is up, which I'm going to let Derevka explain this one, but it's pretty important.
Yeah, so I'll go kind of in reverse order. So the 4-piece for disc specifically is going to be exceptionally important because you got to keep in mind Spirit Shell, which is what it's tied to, was nerfed by 5 seconds. You no longer have 15 seconds to get your spells out. You only have a 10-second window to get your spells out. So instead of getting 6 or 7 casts of Prayer of Healing during Spirit Shell, baseline, best case scenario, you're getting 4, right? It's because 2.5-second cast time divided by the 10-second window gives you a whole 4 casts, right? Simple math.
If you have
That doesn't
perfect
take-
latency too.
Perfect latency, no movement in that 10-second window, and that's kind of the big thing, right? So layering in haste, the logic is, well, maybe if I am now going from maybe 6 or 7 casts, I want to get down to 5. Particularly on a 25-man group, 5 casts allows you to hit all 5 groups and getting Spirit Shells on a majority of your raid, right? Well, to get 5, you need only about 5% haste. It actually works out to about 4.98. But the issue then is that's a perfect number. And unlike haste breakpoints with like heals over time or damage over time, those ticks are guaranteed to occur based on the fact that you cast it at one point. So you cast it at point A, and each tick will happen. Whereas in this situation, you actually have to manually cast those. So if you have to break casting or have a gap longer than your GCD to move, you're kind of done in the water. So if you go exactly to 498, you'll hit the 5, but you need perfect latency and no movement. That's assuming
Yikes.
borrowed time.
Mm-hmm.
Not borrowed time, and just the 4-piece, you
something
need
else,
over
yeah.
8%. That's the bigger issue, right? So you're generally speaking going to always want to enter your 4-piece. Always, always, always with borrowed time, because that's going to bring that curve down. If you enter with borrowed time, you need no haste to get your 4 casts off. It actually will allow you a 1-second window. So if you need 4 casts in 9 seconds, entering with borrowed time and the 4-piece will allow you a full 9 seconds to get 4 off. You want to get 5 off, it's still doable, but you need a good chunk of haste. You actually need to get over a large chunk. In that 9 seconds, you need about 22% haste to get 5 casts off. So it's a little bit tricky. There's a really good thread over on the How to Priest forums that breaks down with 5% raid haste, with borrowed time, without borrowed time, with the 4-piece bonus, the exact haste amounts that you need. And I encourage you, particularly if you're on a 25-man team and you're trying to get those 5 groups, that's probably your best bet. But I would plan on only hitting 4. And anything beyond 4 requires a substantial amount of haste, and probably more than you really want to gear, because you'll be gimping your primary stats for disc, which are typically crit and mastery.
Again, people in the chat room might say there's a lot of math, but it sounds like there's. It sounds complicated, I bet, but I think what you said
it's not
too
that
about
bad.
that. Once you get it, we'll talk about it later in the show too.
Once you get used to the number crunching, you pretty much can figure it out. It just sounds kind of ugly.
Right.
But it's really important to talk about too, because there's an efficiency level where you can get a whole other cast off during your biggest cooldown to really make sure your raid survives. And not to talk about tier 16 too much, but there is a whole lot of huge AoE oriented stuff in tier 16, either if it's cross dot cleaving or AoEing the adds, but there's tons of like huge AoE oriented encounters where you really need to coordinate that kind of stuff. So I'm sure it'll come in handy.
We talk about Holy?
If Sacer would like to, yes, please.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it.
Holy bonuses?
Yeah.
Well, let's see here. I don't really remember the holy bonuses, actually.
Okay, so the two
They obviously both play disc.
Serendipity. So I play disc and holy. I mostly disc, but I like the feel of holy. I find it a lot more fluid. But the problem is disc is just too damn good not to play, right?
Yeah.
Most raids typically will have a holy priest sometimes, but only if they already have a disc priest, right? Or if you're not in that window of raiding where it really makes a difference who you bring. So Holy's 2-piece basically is linked to Serendipity, allowing you to get 50% bonus of a cast that's affected by Serendipity per stack. So you have your Greater Heal and your Prayer of Healing will be affected by Serendipity by giving you plus 50 for 1 stack and plus 100%. So you can get literally 100% bonused Prayer of Healing based off that. And that's off the 2-piece. I think you'll probably see a lot of Holy Priests using 2-piece tier 16 and 2-piece tier 15 until they get into the heroic gear. Mostly because the 4-piece, lack of a better word, is really awful.
What is
it's really awful. The 4-piece.
What's the 2-piece for tier 15 do when you put it together?
The 2-piece is a scaling increase of Prayer of Mending. So every bounce of Prayer of Mending actually will go up in effectiveness per bounce. And given the fact that Divine Insight, which is a spell that allows us to basically turn Prayer of Mending into Chain Heal, you want it. So
that's the long and short of that whole thing is that Holy will want it. All right.
Holy will want probably 2-piece and 2-piece. The 4-piece for Holy is a stacking buff to 3 for a plus 75% bonus on any of your Holy Word spells. So Holy Word, Serenity, which is your single target heal, or Holy Word Sanctuary. In reality, this really means Holy Word Sanctuary is what you're probably going to be using it for. The problem is that Holy Word Sanctuary has such horrible scaling, and it heals for very little. The community has always kind of been like, oh, it's supposed to be like Healing Rain. It's supposed to be much stronger.
Do you want me to bring up the log real quick here?
Yeah, bring up the log.
Yeah, I'll bring up the log too as we get on this right now. Let's Holy Word Sanctuary. Here we go. Bam.
Yeah. So this log really is a raw den log, and isolating just phase 2. So for those people who aren't familiar with raw den, it's a phase that is basically just constant pulsing raid-wide damage. And Holy Word Sanctuary is kind of like a perfect storm. Like you should have like constant damage going out, and Holy Word Sanctuary is going to be underneath everybody because you're all grouped up, and it's ticking for nothing. And so a perfect storm, this is a perfect storm. It's the highest log I could find that I had 4% of my total healing was Holy Word Sanctuary with a overwhelming 49.2% overheal. So we're going to buff that to plus 75% per stack up to 3 stacks. The problem with this currently is that on the PTR, up until the last build, was bugged. It actually was effectively allowing it to stack to 6. So it looked like it was great. I think you'll probably see more and more logs out there that will show how weak the 4-piece bonus is. I'm still hopeful that they might revisit it and maybe change it a bit. Sanctuaries used to be limited by the mana cost, and you'd only cast it as holy when you had your metagem proc. But the PTR did reduce the mana cost substantially. I don't remember the number offhand, but it basically made it a little bit less punitive to kind of just allow you to kind of have it cast out there. I think you'll probably see more Holy Priests casting it now, but more is just kind of that background noise healing, which is okay, but it's just kind of that just background noise, and it doesn't really contribute to anything meaningful.
Yeah.
Well, considering there's a lot of, AoE heals and it's going to be very important next year, do you really anticipate that Blizzard is going to rework Sanctuary, or do you think, they're just kind of going to let it be what it is and hope everyone else can figure it out?
I really don't think so. I'd like them to. The problem is that they've always said it's not meant to be Healing Rain, and I totally agree. It shouldn't be like Healing Rain. But the bigger then issue is if you buff Sanctuary much more than it is currently, it becomes Healing Rain. It's very
Isn't
much
it smaller than Healing Rain too?
It's 8 yards, whereas
Healing Rain is 12, I think.
Is 10, and Healing Rain is now 12. So it's this little teeny circle.
Yeah. And what's the capping on it? Because I know Healing Rain is going up in the future. What's like
DR's at 6.
DR's at 6. Healing Rain's at 14.
No, they reverted that?
I don't know. I think it's still 14 and 25, unless it's going back to 8. I don't have a confirmation and deny on that. I was just wondering if if they all do 6, and the problem is that Sanctuary is so small. Why does it? It seems like a less effective thing, and it has a longer cooldown too.
Yeah, the chat is confirming that it was reverted.
Was reverted?
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Which makes sense. It never made sense for a single
Definitely.
spell to scale, because the number
Yeah.
of healers you brought scaled.
Yep.
So why should a single spell? If that was the case, you'd only bring Resto Shaman, since their spells could basically effectively be more than one healer.
Yep. You are correct. Or we bring Enhancement Shamans, but we're getting nerfed in 5.4.
Okay.
So what did we do?
Oh.
I don't know. I think,
Sub-Zero.
and then our last little bit on this opening stuff here is, I don't really want to talk about my own trinkets, so we'll talk about yours instead. So, what do trinkets look like for you guys in the future here for 5.4? I love that. I love like the sight facepalm here.
Go ahead. Why don't you go first, my dear?
Okay. Well, there's 2 or 3 throughput ones and a regen one. I know for sure 2 of the throughput ones are not looking too good. It looks like the cleaving heals or the chance to heal other people is just garbage. And our one regen trinket is boring. It's like a static int with on use spirit or spear proc. It looks like so.
Yeah,
Not too exciting.
There's 2 regen, and there's one with the on use, which basically is a glorified one that we already have from the Shadow Pan, right? And then there's the other one which has a proc of spirit, and then every second the amount of spirit it gives you ticks down, which really isn't anything fancy. It just it looks shiny because it starts at such a big number and then just ticks down over time. The amp one is the good one, I think. That's the only one everyone's going to want, is the amp one.
And which one is this now exactly? What's the name of it on the so people can look it up? So they can write it down for their priest. They need.
The names
I
in.
need
They
this
just
trinket.
put the names in.
Oh, did they really? Okay.
Yeah, I can pull it up. Give me a second.
Because I know personally from my experience going into trinkets in the future is that like I'm just gonna keep the ones I have right now until I get the cooldown one. And that's it. Because for some reason trinkets are always like a really hit or miss thing every patch. But if you can tell the chat room that is great. I noticed you had one thing on here with Garrosh weapons. Is there anything about that you wanted to talk about?
I was just mentioning that it was kind of cool that they were putting BOA weapons in for the the final boss of the tier. So we're going to be able to level up with these guys or give them to alts, and they'll be useful for more than farm content.
Oh, that's right. Oh, I do have one other thing here that I can grab. Let's see this thing. Redirecting.
I think I saw a post though on the levels for the BOAs, and that it may have been a mistake, the scaling, but I could be
The 90
wrong
to
since it
100?
says 90 to 100, which doesn't really make sense because it's a whole 10 increments.
Well,
Does that mean though that the next expansion is going to be 10 levels though instead of
that's
5?
a lot of
That's a good
speculation
question.
about it. Yeah.
Gonna go up to 100 or 95?
Maybe they're
That's a
just
big deal.
trolling us.
Oh.
That would be interesting.
Well, before we talk about weapons, and
that.
I just don't talk about weapons. Sorry. Before we talk about the cloaks, I did want to. I have a note here to. I don't know if you guys have noticed about this in the WoW community, but they've been putting in kind of like, I guess I should say, paragons or milestones in the WoW community are getting actually put into the game. They've done this throughout small portions, but I've never seen a huge chunk of people getting put into WoW at one point in time. So they are putting Derevka into the game in 5.4, however. He gets a belt named after him. Derevka's gleaming girdle will be in WoW, so you can wear a part of this lovely gentleman in the game. This linked me to the Warforged one only instead of the heroic Warforged, but this is pretty cool. There's tons and tons of these coming in 5.4. For some reason, this is the biggest influx of community-oriented people that I've seen getting put into the game. But that's pretty incredible, though, that Blizzard's doing that. I think it's awesome. You'll live basically forever in the game because you've done a lot for the game.
It's crit.
Well, that's what I think.
I want that belt.
I think what's funny in some of the items I've seen that people have been given for this patch are not actually properly itemized for the spec that they represent. There's been more than one class that I've talked to that's been like that I think is pretty funny. Which I don't know if Blizzard do that on purpose.
It's funny. So we actually had a couple people in guild get an item, and one of our ret paladins, NFL, one of the first things she said while laughing was, "It's a hit neck."
Doesn't need it at all.
Oh,
No,
man.
no one needs hit, right? No one needs hit anymore because it's just laden on everything you have. But in all seriousness, it was actually kind of amazing. Like, someone sent me a link of it on Real ID, and I was like, "You're making shit up." And then, holy crap, there it was.
There it was.
And it's really kind of amazing. They've done a lot of them, recognizing a lot members of the community, both on the PvP front as well as on the PvE front. And it seems that all of them are going to be linked to Ordos, who's the world boss on the Timeless Isle, which is kind of cool. But to complain for a second, I don't want to complain about getting something in game, but because it's a world boss, you now have to RNG getting something off the world boss, and then RNG getting something that's the one you want.
Well, yeah, I guess I understand that to a degree. It is a point to bring up that there's not an easily way to get your item, but I guess you're in the game in the first place, so you probably shouldn't. But I get to what you mean.
I know. I'm not complaining. I'm not. I just want it.
No, I
So
understand.
if you get one, go open trade with Derevka and
Definitely.
try and trade it to him.
Drevka paying handsomely for his own belt in the game if
I
you
will
get
trade
it.
my Spectral Tiger for it.
Yeah, will you?
No, not really.
No, not really. Okay.
Because I can farm the belt.
Yes, you definitely can. Once a week. All right.
All right. I'm gonna change gears into reforges.
Let's talk about reforges real quick.
Yep,
yes, definitely.
let's talk
Sorry.
about reforges. Oh, that's all right. So, tier 16 reforging for disc and holy. How will Raptor changes? Raptor changes affect discs?
No Raptor. I go with Raptor.
Raptors. Sorry, the dinosaur is kicking in my head.
She has. I didn't know Jenni has dinosaurs in her head.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, I don't know, with 5.3 and the Thunder Isle, I mean,
Yep.
there's
No, I
dinosaurs
get you.
every day. Every day in WoW.
So, Sacer, what's about the reforges you guys are looking at?
Well, Disc is kind of at a point right now where our regen is really good, mostly because Rapture scales incredibly well. And there's going to be a Rapture change, so it's not going to be based on our spirit anymore. It's going to be based on the cost of Power Word Shield. So any Disc Priest that has above like 9k spirit around there, they're going to notice less regen overall. Anyone below that might be okay. And let's see. So reforging, a lot of people, I personally still reforge for spirit and then crit and mastery and haste. So I'll probably be okay, but people who drop spirit might want to start reforging for it again.
So spirit's gonna be the big deal then, right? You're gonna go back to spirit, I guess, or if you're
It
not doing
might
it already.
be. It might be. We'll see. We'll see how much it hurts us.
Sort
So,
of.
okay, do you have anything to add on?
I have a
before
little
just-
differing opinion. I mean,
Well, yeah.
so you saw this big uproar on, oh my God, they're changing Rapture. It's going to be only the total amount. I'm not going to be able to cheese it and get a ton of regen back. The people who kind of went up in arms about that really forgot why Rapture's there. And Rapture's there basically as a throttling mechanism to prevent you from just spamming Power Word Shield nonstop. Rapture's there to refund the cost so you can cast it as necessary, but also in some sort of rotational ability, right? So giving too much mana back, really, it's not meant to be a mana positive. And the fact that they've now tied it to just a flat amount, you get one free Power Word Shield every 15 seconds is great, but you still can spam it. Just think of it more as like a reverse Arcane Blast. So the more you cast it, the more expensive it is. So that's the way I kind of mentally equate it similarly. Spirit scales very well for any spec, and obviously Disc kind of gets away with it because you get that free mana. Atonement Healing is exceptionally efficient, and Holy doesn't really have that efficient spammable ability. A lot of Holy Priests will just spam POH and COH trying to fish for Divine Insight procs, which is a very expensive method of having a lot of output. So a lot of Holy Priests will stack more Spirit to counter that fishing for DI. But the bigger issue, I think, is the meta gem. The meta gem allows you to have if you cast a Power Word Shield while under the meta gem, that's just free mana, no gratis, right? And so that's kind of the issue. The meta gem is really, really the driving factor of all this. Mana is not an issue. I'm shedding Spirit. I'm not using the healer legendary cloak. I'm using the DPS cloak at the moment because I don't need the Spirit. I think you will see people return to Spirit. You're not going to see those Disc Priests hanging around at that 8,000-9,000 Spirit level. I think come 5.4, you'll see them probably in the maybe 11 to 13,000 range, depending on what your role is and how much Atonement Healing you're doing. But outside of that, I don't see a huge shift in Spirit. You'll see a lot of Disc Priests stacking secondary stats. I think still doing a lot of crit because of the 2-to-1 ratio. Secondary stats gives you twice as many as a primary stat on either gem or gear.
Yeah.
And I know Sacer and I both are very crit heavy and are using secondary stats as a priority over int because at the gear level we're at, the spell power level pretty much it's a greater benefit for us to get more crit than it is more int at the moment. And you're doing that right now, mostly crit.
I tested it out actually a little bit. One week I did jump for full int, and then the next week I went full crit, and I saw much better results with the crit week. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's points where it'll tip.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, once you're in pretty much full TOT gear, the spell power you have innately will allow that tilt from primary stats to secondary stats. And there's a number of calculators out there that will allow you to figure out for every 1,000 of a given stat, what's my percent gain going to be. So if you need that, there's tons of stuff over at the How to Priest forums that link over to a lot of that math.
No, definitely. And we'll get a little more into that a little later, but I think we should definitely move on and talk briefly, just to get and clear the air. Oh boy, this is gonna be at least another couple episodes of this because I gotta get all of this stuff out in the air here. But we're gonna talk real quick. The legendary. Oh, I hit the wrong button. There's Jenny. The legendary healer cloaks, right? So we've talked about the legendary system. We've talked about the legendary metas, the drop rates and stuff like that, and how it affects higher guilds, what they think of it. No opinions right now. We're going to go with brass tacks. Each cloak has a different proc on it. DPS gets a little cleavy duel. The tanks get that built-in Ankh, basically. And DPS, the casters get an extra dot proc. And the healers, however, get what we talked about earlier, kind of with the trinkets, where it's like a smart heal that snaps off your healing you do. So I want to just get it out there for everyone that heals, what the legendary cloak entails for you guys, and what you guys think about that. So I don't know who wants to take this away first. I personally, I don't. I think Sacer should go with this.
I agree.
Yep.
Go right ahead.
Well, the word on the street is it's not too great for Disc, and the debate about that is that a problem? I personally don't think it is. Disc are kind of known. Disc are kind of known as the heal snipers of this expansion. No one likes us. Everyone, my holy paladin wants me to miss raids or go offline or die because that's the only way he's gonna parse. So I don't think it's too bad of a deal that all the other healers are getting overheal protection while Disc, you know, we're still getting that increased healing. So there's that, and we do have a little bit of overhealing, so it'll benefit us a little bit, just maybe not as much as the other classes.
And just to set this up real quick, what is the legendary cloak proc? Just read it off the cloak if you guys have it brought up real quick here, just to make sure everyone knows what we're talking about here. Because I don't have the actual reading of it. Up. Does someone have it up real quick?
I can
I
pull it
forgot
up
to grab it. Yeah,
it's pretty basic. It basically allows any overhealing gets redistributed as raw healing.
Yeah.
Smart healing, which is the key piece, because we need more
that's
smart
what I
healing
wanted
in this game.
Yeah, that's what I was
More
gonna note
smart
about.
healing for everyone. Let's take skill out of it.
Yeah. But yeah, for what Sacer just said is Disc doesn't really overheal. So then what changes going into Holy for that cloak then?
I wouldn't say a change. I mean, Holy basically, if you really want to, when the proc happens, you can just go completely bananas and just go healing, 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 and then the cloak will just redistribute any of the overhealing to folks that need it, so long as they're nearby the target that you're hitting. I think the big debate, and there's some people in the chat room saying, I think Disc needs a better benefit from the cloak, and I do think that's interesting, because Disc, and I had a conversation with my GM about this, and the phrase he used, and I've kind of totally co-opted it from him, is Disc has a lot of innate overheal protection already, given the fact that so much of Disc's healing is from DA and from Power Word Shield, and those have very, very, very low overheal chances, given the nature of how damage and absorbs work well together. Holy overheals a ton, again, by nature of Echo of Light. So giving overheal protection to the other classes as well as to Holy as a different spec is probably a good thing. I mean, Disc is in a phenomenal place at the moment. But I think more importantly is we need to
we can all
look
agree
at
on
this.
that.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. But we need to look at this kind of how legendaries have worked in the past. Take Tergos' Rest, for example. That was better for some specs of the same class than it was for others. Warlocks, was it better for Affliction over Destro, over Demonology? Yeah, it was better for certain ones than the other. You always have the option of switching. If you really want to get more from that cloak proc as Disc, and you want to have the proc be the heavy lifter, go Holy. You have that option. Now, is that something you should have to do? No, probably not. But any of your overhealing that occurs during that window is still going to get converted, just maybe not as much as everybody else's. I don't think it's a problem. I really don't.
And did you have anything else to go with that, Sacer, before we... I don't want to talk about Legendary Cloaks too long, because I think we're going to really see them... Well, we're going to see the Legendary Cloaks in action in the future, obviously when we have the Legendary Cloaks on them. But I think definitely the big deal is that Holy can take it more than Disc.
Yep,
right now.
pretty much.
But does Disc need it, I guess, is the thing. We'll have to see. Yep.
It's a legendary cloak. We'll be getting it either way. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
I feel like we could just talk about it all day, but we're going to see it, so we'll know definitely in the future how it'll affect us a little bit better.
Yep.
So let's kind of start a new tangent. And in the past, we've talked about the raid bosses for DPS, and we briefly skimmed over what tanks thought of it. And, we talked about the most memorable and favorite boss fights based on mechanics, how it was at the time, how the gating system worked for them, or really the lore behind the boss and what the community thought about that. But from a healing standpoint, I understand the boss mechanics are definitely going to feel very different. So, Derevka, what's your favorite or your most memorable boss?
Most memorable, I think, for me, it was probably Algalon, excuse me. Primarily due to the fact that was my first real foray into the whole Realm First race. And that boss definitely had that sense of urgency that exists in that realm first race, because you literally had a countdown timer, and if you had someone go offline or lose power or whatever, it was just this, oh my god, what are we gonna do, our main tank's off, and you maybe lost that week, which then may have been your week that you got your realm first spam. That was my first realm first spam, and there was real no looking back from there. After that, it was all about getting that spam and doing what you could to get it. So that was my real big memorable fight, if that's what you're asking, as far as from a memory standpoint. I mean, there's certain fights that I have, I favor.
Yes, what's also
over
your
the others.
favorite? So there's like memorable, you're probably stuck on it for a while, but also what's your favorite? Like, what appeals to you the most in terms of bosses?
I really like bosses that build up over time. Either they have multiple phases, and phase one will be very different than the phase two, but then the final phase will incorporate what you've learned from the other phases. Which I know it sounds really kind of cheesy, but I really like Grand Vizier um, in Heart. That was a great one. Mostly because you had the different platforms, and they had very different mechanics from platform to platform, and then you entered the center and the final phase, and you had to deal with all of them at once. And I really like that from a learning perspective. It allows you as a raid to learn how to handle each of the mechanics differently, and then kind of by your powers combined, deal with them all together at the end.
Definitely. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
There are some fights, but that's another thing I was curious about, is because kind of like tanks and DPS have like the same thoughts of fights. We're both up its butt, whatever, or not standing in the stuff. But yeah, I definitely wanted to talk. Yeah, healer stuff is different, where you guys have to deal with.
Very different. Yeah, definitely. What about you, Sacer? What's your favorite boss and your most memorable boss?
Most memorable boss is probably Heroic Lich King. I'd say that was the first one that just took months and hundreds of attempts and doing the same thing over and over and over again. And it was such a satisfying kill. It was a really good fight, good character, good phases, good mechanics, really fun. For me, my favorite fights to heal, though, are ones that I have to do something weird, like on Heroic Mimiron. I had to spec for Holy Nova, and Holy Nova.
What is that?
The entire raid. And I have a video up on YouTube. It's just Holy Nova. Or another good example is Sinestra. I really like doing the rack dispelling, stuff like that. Stuff that kind of gets you out of the normal steric grid kind of mentality.
I can't believe you
Yeah,
just
it's
said.
definitely really nice.
I didn't want to. She likes rack dispelling, which I know every time we were doing Sinestro back in the day, they were always like, "So who gets to do it? Lowest roll wins."
I actually got what was that achievement? I can't hear you over the sound or something.
You can't hear the sound.
Back
Oh,
in
awesome.
Back in Dragon Soul, I had 3 healer alts, and I used to go to open raid and offer to do rack dispels, and I think I got it on 2 of my alts or something. I don't know.
So you have multiple of like one of the hardest achievements to get in the game. Technically,
It wasn't that hard in Dragon Soul once you get
okay.
gear.
Mm-hmm.
But
I got
yeah.
you.
Commitment. You really like dispelling.
Yeah, I guess so.
Good for you. I hated that mechanic.
I don't think I
It
ever.
was just like, who wants to sit there and wait till the timer goes or the color changes and ready, set, go? Not my thing. Not my
But it was
thing
something
either.
you could take responsibility for.
It's true. If you
That's
if
true.
you rock
you
it
screwed
out,
up, you're done.
yeah, that's hilarious.
Okay, I'll give you that. All right, I'll concede. All right,
Well,
you win.
Before we move on to the meat and potatoes here and the real talk, I want to take a moment to tell you guys about I keep hitting the wrong button. I mean, I'll show you. This is just. I have to move to build the show each time. I have to move the scenes around, so sometimes it happens. But to tell you real quick about something that just happened to us that's right now really awesome that we are super excited about. But we are now. Don't ding at me. We are now working in partnership, in cooperation with Mana Flask, where the community brews, to help bring you guys this awesome show of Final Boss TV. So every week they're going to have articles up about us, and we have nothing but awesome things to say about them. They have incredible guides and community-driven streams and articles and stuff all the time on Mana Flask. So you guys should go check them out on manaflask.com. And additionally, if you guys haven't been here before, you know the drill. HowToPriest.com is a huge backbone of the show right now. They do so much for us. You can't see Derevka's double thumbs up right now, but he is doing it. They have everything you need to know about priests, specs, classes, weights for all your different reforges we've talked about here tonight. If there's something you need to do, get more clarification about, you can definitely go to howtopriest.com and learn all about that. If you're new to Priest, old to Priest, you've got new Priest, you're switching specs, you're rolling a different class in the future. I know one of my mods just recently said in the chat room that they're going for a new Priest for tonight, so you should go make a account. Go make an account, Karanak. Go make an account. And learn how to Priest on howtopriest.com.
Yeah.
Definitely super awesome. We're really happy that they are a part of the show. Let me move this. But now, oh boy. Let's break this down. I know we've talked about a bunch at the beginning of the show.
Wait, before we get to the meat and potatoes,
one
more thing to add. So actually one of my guildmates, Suchi, she has a daughter who has mitochondrial disease. And it's a very devastating disease. And basically, the artists of League of Legends are doing a fundraiser event. Right. It's the ARAM Art Show. Let me post this in chat for you guys. It's really cool. You know, it goes for a really great cause. And the world's a very small place. And so, you know, it definitely affects people who we may or may not know directly. And, I mean, you know, just look, or you can look at the gallery, order prints. Just do what you can to contribute. I think it's going to a really great cause, and yeah, just check it out. So now let's get down to business.
I'm showing the website real quick here. I didn't even look at this really before the show. I just grabbed the link, but that is some cool... Are all these are artists that have donated to, or how does this work exactly? The whole Riot Games interaction with the artwork? Because this is really awesome.
I would assume, so they have their Riot Games like artwork, and then they have their personal portfolios, and so I'm assuming that they're selling print versions of, you know, their artwork, or you know, they're kind of doing an art show, and I'm not sure if they're charging for admission. I'm not 100% on that, but for fact, you know, you can support them by looking at the gallery, you know, buying prints, and it's really cool. Sorry, admission is free, costs you nothing, but yeah, so they're
and where does the money go again?
It goes to the, let's see here, I'm going to get the exact name. I don't want to fudge this. Let's see. It goes to UMDF, which basically it's a fund for people who suffer from mitochondrial disease.
Yep.
So
Hope, Energy, Life, definitely. That's awesome. Very, very cool. All right.
Community's awesome.
It definitely is, definitely. Meat and potatoes time?
Sure, I put my glasses on for the meat and potatoes time.
Oh, suddenly you have glasses on. I didn't realize. Yep. All right.
Gotta pretend I'm smart.
Business.
Actually, no, just too much glare was giving me a headache. So,
so we talked a little bit about in the pre stuff in the beginning, but the main focus of the show is talk about discipline versus holy and the differences between the two of them. So I don't know where. There's definitely a lot to talk about here. I don't want to just overwhelm people. So I think Jenni will pick a topic first, and we'll go from there.
All right. Let's see here. So I guess we're gonna look at the difference between discipline and holy priests, and then let's talk about shields and hots. You know, let's talk about disc heals versus holy heals, and if we have any logs, let's also take a look at that. And I mean more so in tier 15 than we can see in tier 16. Just you know how we're looking at it retrospectively.
Sacer, go first.
Okay. Well, as we all know, Disc is very preventative and Holy has great throughput. I think they're a great combination. I really like having one of each in the raid. I think a lot of guilds will run 2 Discipline, though, just because of how powerful they are, but I think they complement each other really well.
And Derevka?
No, I completely agree. I mean, obviously Disc is all about the preemptive mitigation. It's about getting your spirit shell out before the damage happens, or using your power word shield. I think obviously you see more power word shield casting in 10-man because you can hit everybody without completely depleting all your mana, whereas Holy is exceptionally strong on that reverse end. We do run 2 disc. I will switch Holy every once in a while depending on the fight, if it calls for it, or if the fight is more favorable towards Holy. I think a lot of it really does depend on healer comp. Obviously, if you have either a lot of resto druids, and I say that's probably not very common, is he a lot of resto druids?
Yeah.
So we do have one. So he oftentimes will do a lot of the cleanup healing, or if you have a Mistweaver, maybe 2. They oftentimes do a lot of the 3-put cleanup healing that Disc may have missed. I know we kind of joke when we do Horridon, our poor shaman literally gets upset when a dire call hits. She will literally be like, "No one's health moved." And one fight, or one of the doors a couple weeks ago, one person's health moved. One of our rogues, and she's like, "What? What did you do wrong?" So it's interesting to see how it works.
Yeah.
Scan in more stuff. And actually, I just want to derail for 1 second. There's a lot out there. You'll see people with cancel aura macros removing illuminated healing and spirit shell and power.
No way. No.
It is like
Oh
really.
my
It's like,
God.
come on. That's just not good play.
That
So, I
can't be a
guess-
thing.
That's really funny. It's really counterintuitive, but it's funny.
It is.
Okay. So I guess in terms of healing, is it better to prevent damage, or is it better to just clean it up afterwards if they take damage? For Disc and Holy.
I don't know who wants that one first.
Sacer?
'Cause they both. Yeah,
How about you
let's do.
Okay.
Ladies
You know,
first again.
Again, I think that, once again, they have to complement each other. I've seen situations where a discipline just can't keep up with with the damage. Like if I cast Spirit Shell before Megara's Rampage, great. But guess what? I don't have the throughput to make it through there. I need a Holy Priest or a Mistweaver to clean it up afterwards. So really, we have to complement each other.
And if
Yeah,
you don't,
oh, go ahead.
oh no, I was gonna say with the difference in holy and discipline though, with that is it. I know we're talking about them specifically though, but is there a healer that if you don't have, like if you have a disc priest but you don't have a holy priest, what is the best complementation for that if you don't have one of each? Would that be Resto Druid or a Resto Shaman? Because I know paladins are kind of very different in that regard, but so people don't know if they're a 10-man group and they have a disc priest, what should they bring with it if they don't have a holy priest?
Any of the throughput healers, meaning
Pretty much
Mistweaver,
anything
A
else.
Shaman,
Mistweaver Shaman, or okay.
Druid, yeah.
It's a little harder for me to comment on that because I'm in a 25-man, and we're running all kinds of healers. So
What's your typical comp?
Holy Paladin, we pretty much have one of each. Sometimes 2 Shaman, no Druid. So
Okay, yeah. So we have typically 1 or 2 disc priests, 1 or 2 paladin, a druid, and 1 shaman. We have been on a drought of decent Mistweaver apps. So if you're a Mistweaver and you're looking to raid 25 man on heroic,
There you go. There's the plug.
somethingwickedguild.com.
Help
Don't be bad.
DBM. Yep, help
Yeah.
DBM. Create
Help us
everything.
help you.
Yes, definitely. There you go. That's totally fine. I just wanted to get that out of the way. It's not on the notes, but I was thinking about that for a second here, that if you raid 10-man, you only have one of the choosings, what would you use to help that? So, because I don't know if, like, do Disc Holy Paladin go well together, or, like, Holy
can.
Paladin?
No,
Like,
I usually want to go like Resto and Disc if you're in a
Yeah.
10-man. Well, at least that's how we did it in my 10-man. Is we had a Resto Druid and then we had Disc Priest, and that's usually what we did. We tried to avoid Holy Paladins to pair with our Disc Priest, but that's just kind of what our preference was and what stuck best with us. But now I guess for 25-man it doesn't really matter. You could just bring whoever.
yeah, 25-man, it's mostly just a balance of the healers, too, because... Or nowadays it's dropping healers. Which one do you drop for farm content? I know progressing on it, though, it's usually 5 or 6 on every fight. So just a good balance of those. And then I guess on that note, what else is on that? What's next? Let me see.
AoE raid healing.
AoE raid healing? Yeah, I guess AoE raid healing and cooldowns. Talk about those two right here quick here. Sacer, what do you think about raid healing and AoE healing and cooldowns?
Disc has amazing cooldowns. Very, very good. You have to have one in your raid, unfortunately, but our throughput is not too great. Not not after those cooldowns are wearing off.
So what happens, like what's the cooldown rotation I guess you would do to prep for it? What do you guys have?
Usually what I'll do is I'll try to time up abilities, so about 10 to 15 seconds before something goes off, I'll start Spirit Shelling. I usually load up my Spirit Shell with Archangel, Inner Focus, and Power Infusion. So I get that up. After that's done casting, you can throw down a Power Word Barrier, Divine Star, or whatever you're spec'd into at the time. If you have a lot of mana and it's a ton of damage, I like to power word shield spam. Can't do that too often though.
Yeah, that's like it's definitely not how it was back in Wrath of the Lich King, where you could just you just powered shields all day. But yeah, now it's more.
You can maybe do that for 20 seconds once a fight, and you'll be okay.
Yeah.
Besides that, you can prayer mending is okay if you have the 2-piece, and prayer healing by itself. It's about all you got. So.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I mean, one of the things, I think a great fight as an example of going through your rotation and working with what you have is Heroic Lei Shen. So you have each of the quadrants that you're working through, particularly before you get into a transition phase. And your first quadrant, you'll be able to Spirit Shell. And then the second quadrant, I'll pop PI and use Power Word Shield on everybody right before the Thunderstruck hits. And then the third quadrant, at that point, it times up just about well with Spirit Shell again. So you kind of continue through that. You work with what you have. Your cooldowns, this tier specifically, line up very nicely with Spirit Shell. It's only a minute cooldown, and then when it's not available, you have other tools in your toolkit to work with. I mean, Holy obviously uses Divine Hymn as its throughput, and it really depends on, I mean, in Light Spring to a point, it's kind of a cooldown, I guess, depending on what happens with the damage. But the big thing I think that you need to recognize is the damage pattern will notably affect where one will be better from an AoE healing perspective or the other. Disc needs that preemptive opportunity to shine. Holy doesn't need it quite as much because it can just continue to heal throughout the damage and allow Echo of Light to do healing. So I don't know if you wanted to use the log that we had earlier or the other one.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up right now too. I was going to ask if you wanted me to bring that up now because you have basically it's a differentiation between Disc and Holy, and you can set this one up for me real quick as I switch over to it. Yeah.
Sure. So we're going to look at a log on, again, just Phase 2 Raden to illustrate the whole constant damage for Holy. This is obviously going to really illustrate Holy's strength in a constant pulsing damage, because with constant pulsing damage, there's no real opportunity for Spirit Shell to get out in the front, right? So if we look at this damage for just that last minute and a half, 2 minutes of Phase 2 Raden and isolate just the two priests, this is a Holy Priest and a Disc Priest, you'll see that Holy is pretty much above Disc the entire time because of the nature of the damage. The Spirit Shell is basically just as good as the regular Prayer of Healing. There is one point where there is a crossover that actually is where I was using Hymn of Hope. So you actually can see that dip, but I still don't drop super far because at that point I still have my Echoes of Light going on. And then the large spike obviously is Divine Hymn during Heroism. So it's just very interesting. You see both of the healers doing a substantial amount of healing, both of which over 300,000 HPS, but Holy has an additional 10% kicker, actually a little bit more than that. It's over 40k more HPS in that period of time. So it's very interesting given the fact that if you don't give Disc that preemptive advantage where Holy will shine. And it really is up to the priest and the raid leader to a point to determine is the damage pattern going to line up for that ability to really shine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I don't think they're very... Disc is, like I said, very preemptive, not incredibly reactive, I guess is the point. Mm-hmm. You can react with huge cooldowns, but you don't have just this sustaining, which we talked about again before. You are literally above, if not tied, at some little points, but then that one dip is when you were giving people back mana. So,
right, and also with Disc, if you miss a cooldown or you mistime it, you're kind of done. Like if you cast Spirit Shell too soon on a Dire Call and you miss the Dire Call,
there goes everything.
You're staring at timers with Discipline for sure.
Yeah.
Is there any way we can look at Disc versus Holy for Phase 1 of Raden? Is that available to us?
You can if you just switch it over to it. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you'll see I don't do any real healing in Phase 1. All I do is damage and heal one because there's not a ton of healing going out. And
I might be able to pull up a better log. I don't know.
Does your Holy Priest heal in Phase 1?
I'm bringing it up right now because we had this isolated. I can go back to it.
Yeah.
Your Discipline Priest again was Prize, right? Yes.
Priest, yeah.
And I'm going to turn off totals. So here's the entire fight. This is the entire fight. As you can see, this is where we had isolated. Okay, let me move the screen region real quick. This was the isolated part, was back here when the orange starts happening, because this is, I guess these are...
That looks like battle reses.
Yeah.
Very clean
rebirth,
kill. Very
rebirth,
clean kill.
rebirth, yeah. Raise ally. And then the red, I guess, is the phase transition. Yeah. What Roller Vlogs has. So this is... So Derevka is the white line. And,
right. The gray.
And the gray is discipline. So discipline is gray.
So you see disc spikes, because that's when Spirit Shell is absorbing the ball hitting, right? Yeah. And I'm casting Divine Star throughout here, which I do kind of have a few little ticks up here and there. But generally speaking, I'm sitting at the 23k HP. That's pretty much all of phase 1.
So Echo of Light too. That is your mastery as holy.
Right. Yeah. Echo of Light basically just applies a hot for percentage based on your total mastery of that heal over 6 seconds.
That's wild, because that is your top heal by almost 4%. And then if you look at discipline, Divine Aegis, which is their mastery as well, correct?
Their mastery is just increasing absorbs, and also some base healing too. But generally, speaking, absorb increase.
So Divine Aegis though is the shield that procs off of your crits. Yeah, there we go. That's a huge difference, and that's like a passive versus a mastery. That is a huge difference in like your top heal too. I was looking at that.
Well, Holy for the most part is gearing for Echo of Light.
Yeah.
Mastery, very, very mastery heavy. This past week, I didn't respec or regem or reforge for Holy, and I just left myself at 30% crit as Holy, and it was messy. It was not good.
Yeah, you said something about that when we started the show, that it was just not.
Yeah. It was not good. I should go back and respec or reforge for mastery, but I was like, I'm lazy. It's farm content.
But that is pretty wild. The difference is that you look at in huge raid AoE situations, Holy seems to outshine. But then again, if you know what's coming, then Discipline seems to be really good at preventing and doing a lot more to it. So it's a different,
definitely.
It's an interesting dichotomy that the two have, definitely.
Yeah, and it's definitely more visible in the AoE healing type situations where you can see the difference. But just kind of to go off of that, in terms of tank healing, would you say that there's any specific spec that's better at healing tanks than another, or is it very dependent upon the fight mechanics, or is it just pretty much the same? It just depends on how you play it.
I feel Discipline can be very strong tank healers, but we have to sacrifice a lot of other really useful things to focus a tank. So we usually don't put priests on tanks. It's pretty rare because they blanket their raid really well. Plus, with Power Word Shield rolling on the tanks, we're already contributing quite a bit to tank healing.
Yeah, I mean, you have to use pretty much your Weakened Soul Glyph to get your shield back up sooner. You're probably using defensive penance versus offensive penance a bit more often. I mean, yeah, I think of the two, you would pick, if you had to, all right, we need a dedicated tank healer for this fight, you'd pick a Disc Priest over a Holy Priest for sure.
Yeah, I think so too.
And then also, it works well with the tanks toolkit, mitigating damage, particularly if you have, tanks that work well with mitigation. I think the real challenge is if you were to pull either a Holy or a Disc Priest off of the tank, you're now giving up so much of your raid, either mitigation or raid throughput. And why would you? I think you're much better off having one of your Paladins leverage Beacon a bit more, or even a Resto Shaman using Greater Healing Wave is exceptional.
Yeah, so. I think that only that situation comes into play if you needed to for some reason. Again, if you're in a 10-man situation or you have a different healing comp for your 25, if you have no Paladins on that night, so what you would do in that, just if you had to, but optimally you wouldn't want to have either of them on because
someone brought up a good point. Paint Sup versus Guardian Spirit in chat, and I think that's Paint Suppression is going to give you a benefit throughout the entire duration. Whereas Guardian Spirit is only relevant if it procs. If it didn't proc, great, I got a little bit of healing throughput on it, but meh.
But usually a tank is full health, or should be,
Right.
If there are mechanics coming up where it's going to be like a killing blow, kind of like if you were planning on, like, I don't have a cooldown for this next swing on Rawdan. I can't remember what the strike he does at 100 energy that, like, globals you if you don't have a cooldown.
Oh, you need the tank
yes,
to
of
do
course.
because it works. It ignores a lot of externals.
Okay, that's right. Again, I'm not a tank. Lethal Strike is that it's called? Yeah.
Right.
So Fatal Strike. There's a delay on chat, so there we go.
Yeah.
No,
Fusion
it's Fatal
slash.
Strike. It's Fatal Strike.
Yeah,
but
Fatal-
it ignores basically almost every single cooldown.
Okay.
But for
would-
mitigating the damage, you need
but-
to either shield wall it or shuffle or whatever.
Would the Guardian Spirit, though, take the damage and still res the tank after the fatal hit happens, though? That's what I'm wondering.
GS is capped at 200% HP.
So maybe not.
So there's certain abilities that it will
Yeah.
work on. They added that cap back in Kata when they were
The
working
Dragon
on
Soul.
for Thralion and Valiona for Blackout. You saw a lot of raids cheesing Blackout with it. You would, okay, Blackout target on Derevka, I would just GS myself, run out of the group, and Dispel, and not have to worry about the raid damage that the Dispel was going to inflict on the rest of the group. So that's when they introduced that cap. And I still don't think Fatal Strike would function. I think it's actually a flat kill mechanic that exists without the tank buff. I'd have to look at the log to confirm, but I'm pretty certain GS
Yeah.
would not function on it.
I'm not sure.
99% confident that it does not work
It
at all.
wouldn't even work?
Yeah, definitely. So I think we've kind of covered this next question thoroughly, but let's reiterate a little bit. We know that you want at least one disc priest. If you have two priests, you want at least one of them to be disc. But in terms of keeping the raids alive, would you say that one is better than the next? I feel like this question is a little bit broad, but for raid healing, what would you say? One spec versus the other, like in terms of actual healing throughput.
If you had to pick, I guess.
If you
only
had to
have
pick one.
If you only have one priest in the raid, they're going to be disc for sure. Because I would say every priest or every raid needs a disc priest. So.
Definitively, yeah.
But
Yeah,
the great
it's
thing about priests,
clear.
and Derevka and I both do this, is we can go holy and disc anytime we want. It's a spec reswap and a reforge, and we're good to go.
Mm-hmm.
But you're pretty
Yeah, I
pretty solid
think
on.
it's
You want.
pretty-
Yeah, I don't think Holy is
Pretty solid.
kind of niche-ish right now, at least as it is. We don't know if we're going to see a whole lot of difference with the cloak in the patch coming up, but I definitely feel that Holy is kind of like a niche healing thing, and Discipline Priest is like your constant, yeah.
Yeah. I think saying that you need disc always may be a little bit disingenuous. No, I wouldn't say disingenuous. Extreme, perhaps. I think the big thing with, as Sacer mentioned, is the big thing with that is you have the ability to switch between the two. And that's the thing you really need to keep in mind is, do you view yourself as a healing priest if you're beyond just disc or just holy? I really do struggle with people who refuse to only play one spec or the other. If you only are holy or you only are disc, I think you really are selling yourself short and your raid short, because there's going to be certain fights and certain encounters that are going to really play to the toolkit that's available. At the end of the day, it really fundamentally is play what you like. I think, is holy weaker than disc at the moment? Yeah, for sure. There's no question about that, right? But can the job be done by a holy priest? Yeah. Bleeding edge content? No. I think you do need to make some very specific decisions. So
Yeah, like someone mentioned
Yeah.
in chat, holy was really powerful for Heroic Tordos, and I did go. That was the one fight in Throne of Thunder where I did go holy for our first 2 or 3 kills, and then I later started playing Discipline for it once it was farm.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Definitely.
what about next patch? I mean, in terms of raid healing, would you ever see Holy be a viable substitute other than just purely fight mechanics or just class?
I think you'll see a lot more holy priests in raid, given not just the fight mechanics, but I think the changes that exist, which are mostly gear related. I mean, given the fact that you now have that the 2-piece for tier 16 is really a big savior for holy. It's going to give holy, twice as powerful prayer of healing that a disc priest can provide. And the question then really remains, and we'll see kind of where the chips fall once we start doing actual 25-man rating content on the PTR, and then once it goes live, is that 200% POH going to outweigh the spirit shell that a disc priest would be able to provide? And leveraging, as I said earlier, using binding heal to proc more from darkness comes lights, then using those from darkness to proc even more serendipities to then leverage that 2-piece even more. I think that's going to be really a holy priest playing well is going to be using their 2-piece and their meta gem absolutely to its maximum. If you're not using your 2-piece and your meta gem to get the most out of each other, that holy priest is definitely selling themselves short. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And the last thing on this, last point about priest real quick, before we move on, is going to be, do you have anything you want to tell the priest community that they might not know about that you didn't talk about? Like inside tips and tricks and hints at things? Maybe like things to watch for, to manage differently, you know, like I've always used this example because it's a really good one, is that anything on Hurl Tortos has a mechanic where you get a shield that is 75% of your HP. The mechanic on the ground slave one, the mechanic that does is 100% of your HP. So if you have a shield up, you won't die. But if you use any flat percentage-based mitigation before the ground slam hits, you won't lose your shield because the shield damage will be mitigated before your percentage-based damage cuts off your HP that your shield takes. So are there things that priests that you want to let loose about, like hidden inside things that not everyone might know?
For discipline, I'd say the biggest tip or trick is just memorizing your boss timers, knowing, you know, like I said earlier, you've got to start casting that spirit shell 10 to 15 seconds before the damage goes out. And, you know, that might require you to watch some PTR videos before you start learning a new boss, or reading up on the boss abilities beforehand. And so that's really, really important. My other tip or trick that I covered is a really good UI. I think it's really important that you have mods like Rapture Tracker and the POH add-on for grids, so that you know if I spirit shell this group, it's going to hit 5 people, but if I spirit shell this person, it's only going to hit 2. So that's been a very, very big impact for me.
Yeah, if you want to grab any of those mods and throw them in chat for people too. I know you commented on a bunch of these already, but there's a couple you put on the notes.
Yeah, I can link those.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, for Disc, one of the biggest things, I think, obviously, besides knowing the fight and knowing the timing is obviously, you know, tantamount to everything else. But I think one of the things that Disc priests need to keep their mind on, and I think it's much more, you know, prevalent within the community to look for this, but if the fight has a plus damage modifier, your raid DPS contribution is going to go up because you're going to be doing atonement healing. Now, they did change how atonement will work with plus damage modifiers, but the fact that you still are going to be contributing that much more to raid DPS is something you need to kind of keep in mind as Disc. If you have two mobs up and you're atoning the non-damage modifier one, why would you do that over the other, right? But I think, you know, tracking your cooldowns, Disc has an exceptional number of cooldowns. You have, you know, Inner Focus, you have your level 90, you have Spirit Shell, you have Archangel, you have your Penance, you have your Power Word Solace. I think making sure that you have some sort of tracking for all that. I know Sacer and I both use weak auras. That's a huge boon if you're not using weak auras or something else, like Tell Me When or whatever you're using, whatever works best for you. You're really going to be missing that, particularly if it's Power Word Solace. I mean, that's, you know, the synergy that exists between Power Word Solace and Discipline, given the mana regen, the plus healing, the healing it does, but also the evangelism stack is so important for you as a Disc priest. There's Halo Pro, which allows you to work
Halo is a really good one.
with your distance. It's a little bit more of a DPS mod, but depending on if you're going to be intentionally stepping away from the raid to make sure you're hitting them at the maximum Halo distance, definitely use that. But any raid cooldown tracking, not just personal cooldown. ORA 3 has a great built-in one. That's the one I use. I know a lot of people use the Blood Legion cooldown mod that they've developed. I personally like the ORA 3 one because it's more seamlessly integrated with my UI, and I agree, having a good UI is probably the best thing you can do as a healer. I'm very critical about guild applications. It's like, give us a screenshot, and if their healer UI doesn't have, you know, visible stuff that I view as important, like knowing your raid cooldowns available, you know, seeing your grid, seeing your keybinds,
Mm. Yeah, there's some bad UIs out there, but just another question: is there anything that you would say definitively separates good priests from great priests? And would that be in terms of cooldown usage or certain fight mechanics? You know, what choices they tend to make, and if it is fight related, then what's a good example? Let's have Derevka go first. You haven't gone
That's a
first in a
tough
while.
one. I've talked a lot. I think probably the big marker for disc is knowing the fight, and I feel like that we've both have beaten that horse dead. But it is really the single most important thing is knowing the fight timing, looking at your timers, making sure that exists. But high level between a good priest and a great priest, I think is really knowing both specs and knowing when you need to use the other. Knowing when you need to use disc and knowing when you need to use holy, and recognizing that the toolkit that you're, whatever fight you're presented with, knowing which toolkit is going to apply best and using that and leveraging that to the best of your advantage. I think that's probably the best, personally.
Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
completely.
What about you, Sacer? Do you have anything to add to that, or?
No, not really.
Interesting.
He pretty much hit all the main points, knowing the fight and just using the priest to its strengths, just do what you got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty standard too, as well. So, let's see here. It looks like this is the part of the show where we begin to ask questions or
Yep.
answer and ask questions that have been sent to us by mobs and minions. So let's see here. We have question number 1. This is from, how would you say that? Lestunium from Norsadrill. The question is, someone who has healed since TBC, what do you think of the current healing game, aka rotate all the cooldowns throughout the fight and win? You look like you have something to say about it, Derevka. I don't know. What do you think?
I just, yeah.
Well, the hard part with that is there's been this whole proliferation of bring classes that have cooldowns, and classes that don't have cooldowns are inherently weaker than ones that do, be it either Vampiric Embrace or Devo Aurea or Power Word Barrier. I think it's tricky. I do agree, and there is a kind of this movement of should raid cooldowns be limited only to healers, and I tend to agree with that, minus the fact that that does remove utility from a lot of the hybrids. And I know that the Shadow Priests out there are probably hating me for saying that they should lose VE, but I do think that they should lose VE but gain something else somewhere else. Because otherwise you're just going to have this continued stacking, and okay, it's time for phase 2 Raden. Derevka, you start with him, and then Sacer, you go into Barrier, and then Paladin 1 goes into Devo Aura. And yeah, it's a nice way to organize it, but it's not very engaging gameplay. I don't know.
It's definitely a part of the game that has to exist, and I think everyone, like you have warriors with demo banner or rallying cry, or shamans now have AG or whatever else have. There's outside things that help, but I think a lot of the healing cooldowns should be on priests, really. Like the
only priests.
On healers, I guess I should say. I'm talking about priests all night tonight. I can't get them off my head, but definitely. What is someone's typing on the? What is going on with the notes right now? I can't wait until I actually have.
I think Vale just trying to make a point with the notes. Oh, okay. I think this is all right.
You want to read this one?
Yeah,
read this one.
I'll go ahead and read it. So from the lovely Janthrax and Megaparts from Kill Jaden, which is my server, and they're people who I know. Their question is this. With the new changes to Rapture in 5.4, specifically returning 100% of the mana cost of Power Word Shields, how do you think this will work under the effects of the legendary metagem? What about you, Sacer?
Oh, man. I don't know, because a lot of people use the legendary metagem right now to just cast straight Power Word Shields. So I don't know, really. I don't really pay attention to my meta too often. I just kind of run enough regen to...
Blasphemy.
cast the spells I want to cast.
Blasphemy. I know. Real quick, there's the Mistweaver monks. I know the one in my guild religiously watches hers, so I don't know if that's different for each. Yeah,
That's
well,
why. It's because they get free jab, and then they get
Yeah.
to free chi, and then they get free
Correct.
mana tea, and then they get free mana. It's this big chain effect.
yeah,
Bogus.
bogus.
Not that I'm jealous at all.
So then, what were you gonna say about that question then, Derevka?
I mean, I think leveraging, Holy, obviously I mentioned before, leveraging the meta gem proc is going to be huge in 5.4. I think Disc, has the ability, I think, of getting, mana positive returns from Power Word Shield. Now you're going to get 9150, back, big deal. If it's within the space. What I use it right now for is specifically on Raden, not Raden, Lei Shen. If I see my meta gem proc and I'm not in a spirit shell rotation, I'll just go ahead and I'll put Power Word Shields on either the off tank or the main tank if they've taunted yet, and kind of back and forth on a bunch of other people. And if it's absorbed, great. That was free Power Word Shields I didn't need to have to pay for. And in a spamming environment, it can get very expensive. And I do think some people will use it as a way to get mana back.
I
in
don't like
5.4.
waiting for things to cast
But you don't wanna
expensive
wait.
spells.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think you're going to want to wait. You're just going to want to get your free Power Word Shield up. If it procs in there in your Rapture window, great. That's free mana regen. But I think you're still going to just use your meta gem if you see it procced and it's relevant to spam a couple Power Word Shields in there. Go right ahead.
So it might be almost like a
I don't see a major change.
Yeah,
I
not
guess
a
the
major
long and short of
change.
it is too long didn't read. I don't see a major difference between how you're going to use Power Word Shield within the meta gem proc in 5.3 versus 5.4. You're not going to wait for your Rapture window to close to cast it.
All right.
You'll just use it.
And there's one more. I will preface this beforehand though, because it was brought up last week on the show. So the show is broken up into 3 parts. Basically, there's a pre-show. We do a little mic testing and stuff at the beginning of the show. Then there's the actual show itself, and then we do hang out after the show for a post-show where we'll answer some questions like in the chat room and just hang out with you guys and do things like not scripted that we have already written down. The questions we pick for the show, however, go right over here to FinalBossTV. There is a submit a question field. It's called Ask a Boss, where you can submit these questions, and as a big forum, it goes through and it spits us out to us in emails, and we'll pick some of the best ones to put on the show, and that's what we answer. But there is still a Q&A after the show in case you had a question that you want answered afterwards, but that's just for the live people. So if you're watching this in the archive, you get 3 questions, but if you're here right now with all the mobs and minions, you get a whole many other ones. So that's just to let you guys know, and that there's not a reason to just, when we're done with the stream, just to leave, because we had that last week where everyone just like, is it over? And everyone left. But we'll still be here for a little bit after the show. We have one more question real quick. And let's have Jenni go for it, and I will copy and paste in the chat.
Alrighty. So this is from Panerai from Moonrunner. The question is, are smart heals too smart? Is the healing community and heal leads generally okay with the minimal needs for healing assignments anymore?
Definitely depends on the fight. I'd say paladins are still directly put on tanks, but for the most part, smart healing it's great. Everyone else just does that.
Now, we talk about like smart heals that are just like the legendary cloak, or heals that are like mending, I guess is what the difference is.
Any smart heals, like, Chain Heal has a certain smart mechanic. Prayer of Mending, heck, has a certain smart mechanic that exists in it. COH will, Wild Growth will. Anything that has any form of auto-targeting is going to have a smart heal. And I do think we've gotten too many of them. I do think that it exists, but it's a very slippery slope. Who do you take it away from? One of the things that I've kind of tossed around that I think is a very interesting mechanic change is Atonement is one of those ones I think a lot of people hate because it is spammable. It is fairly quick to cast, so you're sniping those very easy, small little heals that just kind of are background noises around the raid. I think it would be very interesting, and again, this is one of those pipe dream I think it would be nice to have, is to have Atonement heals funnel to targets with grace, kind of like Beacon of Lightworks. It basically targets your Atonement heal instead of just sniping all over the place. And I do think what the question is really asking is, do you need to actually have healing assignments as a result? And I think depending on the phase of the fight and certain fight mechanics, you still are definitely going to. But everybody is kind of doing that background noise healing. Very rarely are you seeing anybody with, okay, I need you to heal group 1 and group 2, unless it's a constant damage fight. But I don't know. I do think that there was too many, but I think removing them is going to be a bit of a challenge for Blizzard, because it's going to take a very graceful solution, and I don't know if there is one out there at the moment.
Yeah, there's so, like you said, like background noise healing. There's so much residual, I like to call it residual healing, there's everyone, but I think the game would really balance differently if they didn't have that, because there's a certain amount of healing that is just kind of like there and happens on top of the actual healing that you do, and there's a huge percentage of that if you actually looked at how much it was, it'd be really interesting if they could like balance the game around not having that, but then I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's in a good place right now, personally. But as I say this as an enhancement shaman, stealing logs from healers with the
Healing Rain.
Current Healing Rain adoration, yeah, but I think it's to be fine. I think it'd be good. I hope this doesn't blow up real quick. Hang on. Oh, goodness. Where'd it go? Having technical difficulties. I don't know where it went. Oh my goodness. Alright. There we go. We'll try this again. Derevka from Something Wicked, where DBM comes from, joining us on the show tonight. You can follow him at the Twitter, at just Derevka. How do you pronounce your name again, for those that want to know? Oh, you're muted. Oh no, you're muted.
It's Derevka, but the way I explain it to people is like der, like you're stupid, rev, like a car engine, and ka, like if you're from Boston like me, you would say car, like car.
So there you go. There's a der in there somewhere. It was brought up, and we can call you that tonight during the show. And we
no,
said
you cannot call me der.
Der for short.
Maybe in the after show.
After show, fine. No holds barred in the after show.
Sacer from Obscure Reference, thank you very much for being here tonight. You can follow her on the Twitter at SacerH2P. And I hope we see you back here again. Did you have fun, at least?
I did have fun.
Well, good. That's the whole point. Because, I mean, I don't know about Jenni over here, though, but I'm pretty sure we don't have the beard up tonight. I was going to ask you to do it, though, but Jenni again.
Well, maybe next time I'll surprise you with Sco's eyebrows. I don't know.
Oh, you'll just... You should, like, 3D print them out and put them on for us? That would be amazing.
Yeah.
You can follow her on twitch.tv. It's Galexstraza. She's a dragon in her spare time, apparently.
Oh, my warlock. My warlock is one.
Is your warlock?
The rest
Yes.
is just, yeah.
Well, always. Thank you very much. And let me make sure I have the right one here. There we go, because I have a bunch on me. Adam, a.k.a. Bay. Again, you can follow me on twitch.tv at Bay, TLM. And it's not Tim, like Twitch wants to make it look like. It is TLM. I don't know, just the way that Twitch looks. But thank you very much for watching us again, guys. Next week, we have someone very special on. Well, 2 people very special on. We don't have a 1-person guest next week, but we do have Warlocks next week. Cross-Dodge, Demons and Skulls, oh my, is what I put on my notes. But we have Shinifei of Blood Legion. And Sparkogs. You may have heard of this guild called Method. I mean, Blood Legion and Method, I don't know if you might not know what they are, but Shinifei of Blood Legion and Sparkogs will be on next week with us. We're super excited to do a Warlock episode. We had like a DPS episode with the first one, with Enhancement Shamans, but it was mostly about healing. So this will be our first real big DPS-oriented episode, which will be super awesome. Again, we thank them very much for coming on the show. And again, like every show, you will find out who comes on at the end of each. But we'll see you here next Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, right here on FinalBoss.tv. You guys have a great night. Have a wonderful Sunday. You guys can all wave now. We'll see you all later.
Yes.
And if you're still here, post-show soon.